Okay, welcome back everyone. Josh Weber here with Big Red Jelly with a new Business Boost video. Today's pretty exciting. Going to be diving into just kind of a quick thought that I had as I was talking to another agency owner who kind of asked me, hey, if you could go back in time, not that Big Red Jelly's been around for a long time. We're actually 4.5 years into our lifespan. But I'd like to think that we've grown a lot and we've learned a lot. So we're doing more now, or we're growing faster now than we have ever before, especially after pivoting before COVID. But that's a different story. But he asked me, if you could go back in time to the first year, first 6 months, what are 3 things that you would do earlier, you would do differently, or you would do more of or less of in order to accelerate your growth, right? And we all know hindsight is 20/20. But maybe with that perspective, I like to kind of ask myself that question fairly frequently. Well, what if Josh 3 years in the future came back? What would he probably tell me to stop doing or do more of or do less of in order to help my business grow faster? And that starts to make you think, you start to have some ideas like, I think I already know what my bad habits are or kind of my weaknesses. So it's an interesting thought experiment. But what I told him, if I go back to my younger self, right, 3 years ago perhaps, or maybe when Big Red Jelly was in its first year, 3 things I would do earlier. Number 1 would be to not only solidify the long-term vision a lot better, but share it with the team earlier and more transparently, right? So we hear this word a lot, vision, 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 but have you actually sat down and said, what is the plan 10 years from now? What is the plan 5 years from now? What is the plan 1 year from now? Most owners or entrepreneurs don't know the answer to that question. And so then you have employees or managers or leaders in your team. How can you expect them to know the answer to that question? And so how can you expect them to then have top priorities for a quarter, for a month, for a week, if they don't know what the vision is for the year, for 5 years, for 10 years? And so just some really rudimentary things to think about. What is your revenue goal for 10 years from now? What's your exit strategy 10 years from now? What does your company look like, feel like? How many employees do you have? What kind of award or certification or highlight do you want to receive at that point? And then you can say, okay, now what about 5 years? And then what about 3 years? And as you work your way back to 1 year, you'll notice that your obstacles, your priorities, your goals, and your KPIs become more and more specific. Then all of a sudden, setting quarterly projects or goals become more realistic and more meaningful. And then sharing this with the team just gets everyone on the same page. So we've really put emphasis into that this year at Big Red Jelly. Probably starting about 6 months ago. And the benefits really are exponential. And I'm convinced that I'm only starting to see some of the upside now. I think a lot of it is still to come. So it's mentioned a lot, but I think very few of us actually sit down and do it. What is your vision? And then sharing that with your team in great detail, making sure that they're bought in. Because everything else flows from that, right? So number 1, set your vision. Which leads me into number 2, which is solidifying a better quarterly structure or 90-day structure, right? Why is this important? Because if you've set a 10-year vision, 5-year vision, 1-year vision, at the end of the day, us as human beings, there's a lot of kind of interesting research that shows that we have a hard time realistically thinking beyond 90 days. That's kind of where our world exists. 3 months, right? 3 months, 3 months, 3 months. It's kind of like a season, the next season, the next season. And so breaking it all down into, okay, well, given our 10-year vision, our 5-year vision, all that, what is our quarterly structure? What are the top priorities we need to get done this quarter? What are our non-negotiables in order to get that 1-year goal or vision? What needs to happen this quarter, right? Then it becomes more realistic. And if you can get your whole team on that page, so then they have their quarterly priorities. And the mini quarterly vision. Again, just breaking it down that way. And when I look back at the early years, it was very much like just going 1 week at a time. Many of you know this feeling of 1 day at a time. And next thing you know, 1 week passes, 2 week passes, 3 week passes. And and you look back and you're like, I don't know what direction I'm going. I've checked off one of my priorities out of a list of 20. I got sucked into the minutia, right? Which that'll happen. But again, just having that vision, even subconsciously, I think is so beneficial. Now, on that note, and this kind of goes into point 1 and point 2. So point 1, set the vision. Point 2, a quarterly structure. I'm going to go back to point 1 really quick and add to the vision, setting KPIs or metrics. I really think if you were to sit down, and I challenge you to do this, interview everyone on your team and say, what are the metrics by which you know if you are being successful? Or what are the metrics by which, the numbers by which, whether it's one number, maybe you've got 10 numbers. What are the numbers by which you know if you're going in the right direction or the wrong direction? And see what kind of answers they give you. I'm going to guess that a lot of people say, I have absolutely no idea. I thought I was doing it for a pat on the back. Might be this number, and that's way off. Maybe they've only got one number in mind when in reality there's 3. Maybe they've got 50 numbers in mind when in reality it's 3, right? So I'm a firm believer that everyone should have certain KPIs. Does it represent everything in your area of responsibility? No, but it's a main driver. And I promise you, if you just give KPIs to your team members, they will feel empowered. They'll feel a sense of freedom now that they've got these numbers that in a way they can track and gamify and see if they're going in the right direction. And if they're not, then they can self-assess, ask for help earlier rather than later. So KPIs. Does everyone have KPIs? Here at Big Red Jelly, we've got, depending on your role, once you solidify your role, you might have anywhere from 3 to 5 KPIs that represent your area of work, right? So that's a whole different video, but vision and KPIs, number 1. Setting those early. I did not set those early. It took me years to set those, right? You just kind of assume people know. Well, it's with the job title. Don't assume, right? So KPIs and visions, number 1. Number 2 is a better quarterly structure, right? Setting the long-term vision, but then breaking it down. Okay, given that, what's the short-term structure? Then what are the quarterly goals, quarterly projects, quarterly non-negotiables that have to get done? Finally, number 3, I've said this many, many times, just from a sales and acceleration perspective, key partnerships, right? I really believe in key strategic partnerships, right? You do something better than a lot of other companies out there, and they do a lot of things better than you do. And there are those partnerships out there where it really is mutually beneficial to work together. I'm not talking about the ones where you kind of just talk about it and you might send each other business, but I'm talking about real partnerships where you get each other, you understand each other, your workflows just operate well together, and you're able to send them business and vice versa, or you're able to satisfy a lot of their clients' needs and vice versa. When you find those real effective partnerships, especially with companies that maybe have been in the industry or in a parallel industry much longer than you have, maybe they're a larger company, but they don't offer that particular service that you do, it really is rocket fuel to your growth, both in marketing, sales, PR. That would be huge. If I go back in time to year 1 Big Red Jelly, a younger Josh, it would be, hey, this has got to be a top priority. I want you to bust out your contacts and you're going to go build relationships with what could be future partners. And it took me years to figure that out. And once we did make that happen, and sure, not all partnerships work out, but many did and still do. And it is amazing. And it's been a huge driver in terms of our exponential growth. So there you have it. Those are the 3 things I'd go back and tell a younger Josh to focus on in the early days. Solidify a long-term vision and share it with the team. And I would even challenge you to do that semi-frequently, right? Vision and KPIs. Number 2, build a quarterly structure that makes sense, right? Those quarterly goals or projects you're working on, or to-dos or action items that everyone on your team is working on, should play into the greater vision. That's what's going to move the ball forward. That's what's going to allow you to get to the end of a year, look back and say, wow, we got a lot done, right? Because we were just laser focused. And then finally, number 3, key partnerships, the real partnerships that are mutually beneficial. Okay, that's it for me. What would you suggest to a younger self, right? If you could go back to yourself in your early entrepreneurial days, or maybe when you're in a different role or you're starting your business, what would you do? What would make your life easier? What would help your business grow faster and more efficiently? Let me know. I'm very curious. Thank you.